Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Skokie Village Board for Monday, June the 5th, 2023. This evening, we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by our village clerk, Pramod Shah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The meeting will come to order, and I would request a motion to allow Trustee Pure-Slovan to participate remotely. A motion is in order. Trustee Sutker, seconded by Trustee Kuhn. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Here and I.
Trustee Robinson,
Here and I.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Pure-Slovan, Trustee Klein,
Aye.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes. And I will just assume that everybody voting is here. So, welcome, Trustee. Next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda for this evening's meeting. A motion is in order. Trustee Johnson, seconded by Trustee Klein. Is there anything on the consent agenda anybody would like to have removed? If not, call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Pure-Slovan, Trustee Klein,
Aye.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes. Is Dennis Rizzo, Dennis has agreed to be the vice chair of the Skokie Use of Force. James Specker, who you all just approved to be the new chair, was out of town and asked me to extend his thanks for the appointment. Will Evans, I think I saw Will walk in. Will, I want to single Will out and thank him for his great service to the village. Will agreed to be the chairman and to get the Skokie Police Use of Force Review Board off the ground, which he did in great fashion. And he did that in addition to being the chairman of the Board and Fire Police Commission. And I believe at the time you were also the chair of the Tollway Authority for the state of Illinois, if I remember correctly. So Will had many items on his plate, but Will, I wanted to thank you very much for getting the commission off the ground. And I know that James and Dennis are going to do a great job. And thank you very much for your willingness to help and participate. And with that, the next item is report of our village manager, John Lockerbie. Oh, excuse me. Oh, my gosh. I beg your pardon. The next item on the agenda are two proclamations this evening. The first one is a proclamation declaring Juneteenth, and I would like to ask Trustee Robinson to do the honors.
Be my pleasure, Mayor. Thank you. And I wanted to give Will a shout out to thank you for all your hard work and getting that off the ground. It's a proclamation to recognize Juneteenth. Whereas President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, ordering the freedom of all people enslaved in Confederate territory. And whereas on June 19th, 1865, Union Major General Gordon Granger announced the end of the Civil War and the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation in Galveston, Texas, legally freeing the last of the Confederacy's enslaved people. And whereas Juneteenth is also known as Emancipation Day or Freedom Day, it's been a tradition in the United States for more than 150 years, commemorating the Galveston announcement and celebrating the freedom of African Americans. And whereas continued anti-black violence and systemic racism compel us to acknowledge and reckon with the painful history and legacy of slavery and racial injustice in the United States. And whereas in 1961, the first African American family purchased a home in the village of Skokie, and their courage and perseverance, as well as the establishment of the Skokie Human Relations Commission in 1961, and the passage of the first Fair Housing Ordinance in 1968, paved the way for thousands of black residents of African American and diverse ethnic cultures who currently call Skokie home. And whereas black leaders in education, government, businesses, faith communities, journalism, science, sports, and entertainment, those both known and those uncredited, have enriched Skokie, Chicagoland, and the country and world. And whereas we believe that through love and equity, we can take steps to ensure full freedom and opportunity for all. This year's community Juneteenth celebration in the village of Skokie, Love, Liberation, Life, will take place on June 17th, 2023. Now, therefore, I, George Van Dusen, the mayor of the village of Skokie, do hereby declare June 19th, 2023 as Juneteenth, the village of Skokie, and urge all residents to recognize the significance of this celebration in African American history and in the heritage of our nation and village, passed on this 5th day of June, 2023.
Thank you. I don't see Brian Williams, or is Alice Pappas? Alice, if I could present this to you.
You all can join us at the celebration. It's Saturday, June 17th at Oakton Park from 1 to 7 p.m. Thank you very much.
And it gives me pleasure to invite Trustee Johnson to do the honors on the Pride Month proclamation. This is our first, and Trustee Johnson and I have worked together on this, and I would like to ask him to please do the honors.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a proclamation for Pride Month. Whereas the village of Skokie is a village that welcomes all, and we are a community committed to equality and inclusion for all residents, and whereas the month of June is designated as a month to commemorate the Stonewall Uprising in New York City that occurred in June of 1969 and is widely recognized as a catalyst of the LGBTQ+ rights movement, and whereas the village of Skokie is dedicated to fostering acceptance of all of its residents and preventing discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, and whereas this month we remind our LGBTQ+ community that they are respected, supported, and that we fully stand against intolerance, discrimination, and injustice to our LGBTQ+ friends and family, and whereas Skokie supports the diversity of ethnic, cultural, racial, gender, and sexual identities of its residents, and we reaffirm our belief that LGBTQ+ rights are human rights, and whereas it is imperative that the young people of Skokie, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers, educators, and community leaders, now we do hereby proclaim the month of June as Pride Month.
Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our village manager, John Lockerbie.
Thank you, Mayor Van Dusen and trustees. Good evening, everyone. Item A is regarding the adoption of fiscal year 2024 budget. The memorandum included in tonight's agenda packet is a summary of actions and decisions made by the Mayor and Board of Trustees during their review of the fiscal year 2024 budget. These actions are the result of 3 public hearings conducted by the board in April. In summary, the fiscal year 2024 general fund budget or operating budget equates to $67,259,671. All funds, including water, pension, economic development, motor fuel and local fuel tax, self-insurance, general obligation bonded debt, tax increment financing, federal aid, Performing Arts Center, Convention and Visitors Bureau, special service areas, wireless alarms, and capital improvement program total $154,600,571. Mayor and board approval of the budget is respectfully requested.
A motion to accept the recommended budget for the year is in order. Trustee Kuhn, seconded by Trustee Sucker. Comments or questions? We're spending $154 million.
I just want to say, I know so much staff work goes into this, and so I just want to give a big shout out to John and Nick and Julian and everyone who puts so much time and energy into this. A lot of work goes into this.
They did a great job, as always. Call the roll, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is Lauren Grodnicki, and I would like to thank you for finding money in the budget, even though we have the property tax freeze, for the sustainability coordinator and some of the sustainability action points in the plan.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Pure Slovin, Trustee Klein,
Aye.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes.
Item B is regarding election and districting legal services. In the November 2022 election, Skokie residents approved 3 referendums that changed Skokie Village Board elections to nonpartisan, staggered terms for trustees, and representation through the creation of 4 geographic districts represented by 1 trustee each and 2 at-large trustee representatives. In anticipation of executing these electoral changes, village staff pursued the engagement of a consultant specializing in election law to assist with referendum implementation. A request for qualifications, or commonly known as an RFQ, was solicited and 3 bid responses were received. It is staff's recommendation that a contract for election and districting legal services be awarded to Klein, Thorpe, and Jenkins in an amount not to exceed $36,750. KTJ, as they're commonly known, represents over 30 municipalities as general counsel and has decades of experience in election-related matters. I concur with staff's recommendation and respectfully request mayor and board approval.
A motion to contract with KTJ for electoral consultation is in order. Trustee Johnson, seconded by Trustee Sucker. Are there any comments, any questions? Trustee Kuhn.
Do we have any thoughts or any insight into what we think the turnaround time would be for putting together an implementation plan?
So the intent is definitely for everything to be implemented by the end of this calendar year. And so we will be meeting with them and kicking off the project if this is approved this evening. And then a lot of this is legal interpretation and looking at the state election code and applying these 3 referendum. And so the first step is a considerable amount of research on their part. And so we will know more after that step is completed. But there will be ordinances that will need to be considered by the board. And so the final work product will be coming to the village board.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to talk about scope and see what the outcome target. So thank you.
Village staff.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I did.
Mike Alexic
Alexic.
is the assistant finance director.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
part of the selection team.
Got it. I had one comment kind of for the board. This is kind of like a forward-thinking kind of comment, but I want to say I support the selection of this law firm. I'm very grateful for our village manager for managing this process so far. I am just kind of assuming that the districting process the mapping of the 4 electoral districts. I'm just kind of assuming that that's going to be the part of this implementation that generates the most interest. But I wanted to draw the board's attention to another, in my mind, kind of equally significant implementation question that's not specifically addressed in tonight's memo about this agenda item, but that will kind of inevitably come up. And it's the question of how the village is going to combine staggered terms and hybrid representation. So I just kind of wanted to raise this issue for the board's consideration moving forward. The referendum questions that were approved by voters last fall state that we need to stagger our elections so they're held every 2 years. They state that they need to be hybrid, so instead of having 8 at-large positions, we'll have 4 at-large positions and 4 district-based positions. But the referendum questions don't say specifically how to separate and stagger these 8 at-large positions. And there are actually many ways to do this. Many municipalities combine staggered and hybrid representation in different ways. So I just kind of wanted to make sure the board's aware. The advocates of these referendum kind of had always encouraged that the line be drawn between the at-large and the district-based positions, that they be staggered, the 4 at-large positions in one election and the 4 district-based in another. This is the way it's done in the city of Wheaton, which is kind of a comparable community for us. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that that issue is on everyone's radar. I have no doubt that it's going to be one of the kind of critical undecided implementation issues as we move forward.
It's going to be tricky. So did we take a vote?
We have
We did
not.
not vote on that, so call the roll, please, I'm sorry.
Trustee Sutker,
I think we have a comment.
Yes, yes.
Sorry, thank you. I'm Emmy Yamauchi, a resident of Skokie. I just wanted to ask, in terms of this contract, will there be milestones at which point the legal team will report out at a village board meeting on certain aspects, or is the whole package just gonna kind of be presented, on December 1st or something like that? That was one question. And then the second question is, because a lot of specifics obviously were not in the specific referendum questions, is there going to be any room or any time for either public input or consultation with the group that originally put forward these referendums to get an idea of what their original intent and purpose was, as opposed to the strictly kind of legalistic framework? Thank you.
So there will be milestones, and there is a village website. On the village's website, there's a specific page that will continually be updated to people can follow along with the progress and as the project moves forward. And then for input, if there's specific input that the Alliance would like to share, I'd be happy to receive any written correspondence that they would like to provide as we move into implementation. But there will be opportunities through the approval process for public input. There's no question that that's part of the process.
Okay, but you're talking about being mostly in terms of being via email as opposed to board meeting or in person?
No, there's always the public input. In person is absolutely welcome. I was given another opportunity. I heard you say that there was specific input that members that were involved in getting the referendum approved have thoughts about the implementation. And so I made the offer that if you would like to share those with me in writing, that would be of interest and would help the process. And so absolutely, always welcome to make public comments. And also if you want to provide something in writing, or if there's members of the team that want to provide something in writing, that's a welcome opportunity as well.
Okay, thank you.
Call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Pure Slovin, Trustee Klein,
Aye.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes.
Item C is regarding a recommendation for adoption of building code amendments. Periodically, the staff reviews and revises village codes. As a result of a recent review of the building codes, Staff recommends amendments to define new construction, add email as a method of service, clarify penalty fees associated with work without permits, reduce submission requirements for permit applications to facilitate easier processing for customers and the village, and addition of property maintenance codes language that clarifies some elements to be inspected during certain inspections. I concur with staff's recommendation. The mayor and board are respectfully requested to authorize Corporation Council to draft the necessary changes.
A motion is in order. Trustee Klein, seconded by Trustee Johnson. Are there any comments or any questions? Trustee Sucker.
I had a resident ask me how it's handled if they see something that is being built and it's not, it's what they think isn't under code. Is there a process they go through?
So there's a number of ways. There's Johanna Knighton, the Director of Community Development, is approaching the podium and may have some additions to what I comment. They can always contact the building department, and so there's the City Source app that is available on people's phone, and so if they observe something, whether it's in the scenario that you're speaking of or it's another item that they notice in the community that they want to share with us, the app is an easy way to do that. Also, email is available through the website. But they can always call the building department. If they see something that doesn't seem right to them, they can always reach out to the building department and speak with the building manager.
And is that kept anonymous if somebody calls?
If a resident or a person contacting us wants to be anonymous, that is respected.
Okay. Thank you.
I was just gonna appreciate the annual, or however you guys continue to review the process. And I know post COVID, we learned a lot. So I appreciate you and your team continuing to revise to make these processes easier to navigate. Thank you.
Call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Pure Slovan, Trustee Klein,
Aye.
Mayor Vengus.
Aye, the motion passes.
Items D, E, F, and G were approved as part of tonight's consent agenda. Item H is regarding a request for executive session. Pursuant to Section 2, Paragraph C11 of the State of Illinois Open Meetings Act, a closed session is requested and to adjourn therefrom.
A motion for an executive session is in order. Trustee Sucker, seconded by Trustee Robinson. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Pure Slovan, Trustee Klein,
Aye.
Mayor Vengus.
Aye, the motion passes.
That completes my report this evening.
Thank you. Next is report of our Corporation Counsel, Michael Lorch.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Items A, B, and C on my report this evening were approved as part of the consent agenda at the beginning of the meeting, and that would conclude my report.
Next item on the agenda are two Plan Commission reports, and Johanna will present them. Johanna Knight, excuse me.
All right, good evening. Here for two cases. The first case is case 2023-02P, special use permit for a drive-through at 5252 Dempster Street. At its April 20th, 2023 meeting, the Plan Commission heard a request for a special use permit for a drive-through for a Dunkin' Baskin-Robbins limited service restaurant in the B3 Business Zoning District. Relief from Section 118-218 to provide 16 parking spaces rather than the required 19 parking spaces, and relief from Section 118-212I1 to allow continuous curbing less than 6 feet from and parallel to any property line adjacent to the street frontage. The petitioner, Dempster Lockwood LLC, represented by Rena here tonight, is proposing to adaptively reuse 14,600 square feet of a former commercial site. The previous financial institution used drive-through operations, but has not been used for, but has now, the property is currently used for temporary office space. In addition to the Plan Commission's review of case 2023-02P, the commissioners also discussed potential development of a drive-through policy at its meeting on April 20th. The policy reflecting the Plan Commission's discussion is included as an attachment to the memorandum that's in the board packet tonight. Understanding the concerns associated with drive-through operations in an urban environment, the applicant has incorporated a number of these policies into this project. This includes providing an additional 5 trees on site, or funding for 5 trees, reduced parking on site, and providing mobile ordering options and dedicated mobile order parking, and then is also working with Duncan Corporate to investigate recycling and composting options for the operation. The Plan Commission recommended by a vote of 7 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 absent that the petitioner's request for a special use permit for a drive-through facility, the 2023-02P, be approved based upon applicable proposed findings of fact and subject to the special use permit conditions that are attached. The Plan Commission further recommends that the relief be granted from the code sections previously stated.
A motion to concur with the Plan Commission's recommendation, case 2023-02P, special use permit 5252 Dempster, is in order. Trustee Klein, seconded by Trustee Robinson. Are there any comments or questions? Yes.
I was part of that Plan Commission meeting that night, and I showed that for a typical drive-through, you need about 2,000 trees to offset the emission, and 5 trees is just a joke. So I urge you to require that if you're going to actually give them what they're asking for, that you get more from them and have them fund maybe 500 trees or more, 1,000 trees.
I just have a concern because that corner is, I think you're talking about the building on the corner of Lockwood and Dempster, right by the expressway. That's a really busy corner already, and thinking of cars and traffic, I mean, I don't know what the traffic flow would be, but I know that I drive that corner a lot, and can't even imagine introducing drive-through traffic to that area.
Thank you. May we have your name, ma'am?
Oh, yes, sorry.
It's okay.
Lois Householder.
Thank you very much.
Johanna, could I ask you about if you could just go through us the drive-through policy recommendations that were made to the Plan Commission at this meeting, and kind of where they're at in terms of a timeline when we might see this at the board level? Just so we can get a kind of a sense of kind of what staff sees as potential options for mitigating some of the more negative impacts of drive-throughs.
So there were they discussed 6 recommendations. So there were several that dealt with zoning, changing the zoning code. So those are going to be held and discussed at a further Plan Commission case. So the first was modify allowed location of drive-throughs in Skokie. So that had a mixed response from the commissioners. They felt the need to study that a bit more. They were not prepared to take action to make a recommendation that night, but there was a lot of discussion around it. The second recommendation was reduce the parking requirement at drive-through establishments. We know from observation that often drive-throughs are used as drive-throughs. They're not as like parked and go in. So the idea of potentially reducing parking spaces, such as the case of this situation, allows for a little bit more green space, potentially allows for better maneuverability of the vehicles through the site to reduce some congestion, but also then potentially, which sort of leads into the recommendation 3 includes portions that lead into that, require that that deliveries are prohibited during peak times, so you don't have a big cluster of cars at the same time, and also additional idling. Require mobile ordering, which would then include potentially a spot where people could park to pick up their orders, run in, run out. Increasingly, there's even some fast food establishments that are bringing food out to the vehicle. They have license plate readers. The process is constantly evolving. And then also include a plan on record with the village that addresses how operations will be managed to reduce the queuing. So often restaurants have a plan internally, but require that that be on file to make sure that they have already thought about that before it is a problem. Recommendation 4 is requiring additional trees on site or a fee in lieu. 1 tree for every 100 car trips was what we recommended in terms of number of vehicles. The challenge, I think, as Lauren helped point out, is emissions for different vehicles generate different things. So one, is making, and we have a really nice presentation of different vehicles and peak times and number of vehicles and the type of emissions. So there were a lot of questions from the Plan Commission as to what might be the right fit for what would generate traffic at a drive-through. Recommendation 5, require drive-through restaurants to offer composting and recycling in addition to waste that will go to the landfill for both kitchen as well as dining area. For drive-throughs, people are taking their waste home, so they're not necessarily going to be on site. So back of the house recycling and kitchen waste composting is something that we know corporate restaurants are increasingly doing and helping implement that. And then 6, develop drive-through language for Skokie zoning code in accordance to best practice to add clarity. So that would be adding a drive-through facility as a use within our zoning code. We don't have that currently, so we propose language.
If no one else has any questions, I just want to comment. There was a really fascinating discussion at the April 20th meeting about the parking setup for this site, with some commissioners and residents kind of expressing concerns about how some of the parking is off an alley, so cars would be pulling in and out of parking spots via an alley that's shared by some of the nearby residences. I also just want to point out a few residents from the homes immediately north of this site expressed some concerns at the meeting that in my mind were kind of shockingly similar to some of the concerns that we heard from residents last year when there was a TUI Dunkin' that wanted to expand with a drive-through. Lots of concerns about lighting, especially kind of vehicle headlights shining into homes. I'm not sure how late this business is going to be open. I know there was talk about this maybe being open to 10 or 11 p.m. or even later. Lots of concerns about noise, lots of concerns about garbage, and just kind of the negative impacts of living next to a fast food drive-through. So anyway, I think we've kind of heard some of this very similar concerns from residents kind of both times that we've had a kind of a Dunkin' drive-through expansion.
Ma'am, did you have a comment?
I'm trying to decide.
Oh. Please. We don't bite.
I actually live in that neighborhood. I live a couple blocks north. And so when I say I drive that corner a lot, I mean, I guess my concern is traffic safety and hearing that, there's planning for, making it look nice, et cetera, doesn't really, to me, address the issue of the fact that this is the light right by the Edens Expressway entrance. And that corner already sees a lot of people racing through to, make that light to get on the highway. And I just have a serious concern about the traffic issues that could occur with the place, and even maybe more so because of the drive-through, where people are just going in, picking up stuff, and then they're on their way. So, I just expect that people are going to be in a hurry, and they're not going to want to take time to be respectful of, what the original deal was.
Thank you. Trustee Robinson?
I was just going to ask about a traffic study and how that directs or informs different projects. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, so for projects like this, we require a traffic study, and then Public Works, our engineering department, reviews it. And I think Russ left, but the staff reviews it, and we found that the results were acceptable and that the intersection would still be able to flow and traffic would move. There's a signal, there's 2 lanes. It will, based on the traffic, there will be more traffic, but it will not compromise the intersection.
Yeah,
Trustee Kuhn, and
sorry,
then trustee Sucker.
my question was just related to that traffic area as well, because when people are getting off of the Edens, even though they're not allowed to turn left on Lockwood, I'm not sure how often that's enforced. And if there are things that we can do to mitigate people potentially crossing over, and creating more traffic congestion in that area. If that was considered as part of the study as well, or did it come out that you didn't think that there was going to be sufficient impact to add the drive-through there?
I don't think there's gonna be, there may be small peak periods. People generally get their coffee in the first thing in the morning. And I don't know if you brought anyone with you to speak to the traffic study, or if you want to, but these sometimes can be, people are creatures of habit, so they're gonna maybe get their coffee from the same location every day. It's not the first time that there will be some first-time coffee, but you, through enforcement or other ways of training people when new things come along, usually those issues are resolved.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and trustees. My name is Rena Panjwani Khwaja. I'm representing the Dunkin' Donuts that we're speaking about here. In general, people will not go out of their way for a Dunkin'. So eastbound, Lockwood, you know, there's other coffee locations, other Dunkin' locations, eastbound on Dempster. So generally with Dunkin', it's on your way, it's in your way to work. I think even the traffic studies showed that most of our customers are already there, and this is even more so than the new Dunkin' because there's already a Dunkin' on Dempster and Grosse Pointe that'll close. So our customers are basically already there, right? So we are just making it a lot more convenient for them to get their coffee in and out. We are closing, the existing bank had 3 access points on the site. We're closing one of them to improve the safety of that site. So you'll have 2 ways to exit, so hopefully that'll be less congestion on Lockwood.
Trustee Sucker.
What percentage of people use the drive-through versus going in when you have a drive-through?
It really depends on the store. So there are some stores that are 90%, there are some stores that are 70%. And again, our Dunkin' drive-thrus are really fast. So the light at Lockwood takes 90 seconds if you sit at it. Our goal is to be at 90 seconds or less once you get from the menu board to the window. So I know there's concerns about idling traffic, but we go very, very fast, and we're built to be fast. And we continue to look for operational opportunities to be able to streamline that operation so we can be very speedy in the morning.
Thank you.
I wonder if I could just ask you a question unrelated to the specific case, but since I've got you here, are you encountering difficulty in hiring? I noticed, this was 6 months ago, maybe it was even longer than that, the Dunkin' on Gulf Road. If you know the one I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Very well managed, by the way. As my granddaughter will tell you. But there were signs up, lawn signs, that Dunkin' was offering bonuses, signing bonuses. And I'm just wondering if you're still having difficulty hiring.
I think like most restaurants that had to manage during COVID and, post-COVID, there was a very challenging time competing with some of the other government benefits, for example. It was really challenging to hire for a good 2 years, but I think it's starting to stabilize now, and those signs are gone, thankfully. Of course, restaurants have always historically, we've had some challenges hiring, but overall, I think right now we're fairly stable. My brother is here; he handles our HR, so he knows a lot more. But I know I think it's a lot more, it's 100% more stable now than it's been 6 months ago.
I mean, that was my observation, but I
Yeah.
wasn't sure.
Yeah,
Thank
things
you.
are getting better. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
No, any other comments or questions? If not, call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
I'm going to vote nay on this, partly out of sympathy with kind of the residents north of the site, but mainly because I'd really like to see the village move forward quickly with staff's recommendations to further kind of limit drive-throughs in Skokie. I think permitting additional fast food drive-throughs in Skokie is not really in line with our new sustainability plan. So it's a nay vote for me.
Thank you. Trustee Pure Slovin. Trustee Klein,
I vote aye.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, but I would like perhaps to ask at some date in the not-too-distant future that the Plan Commission take up the idea of looking at drive-throughs to see if there isn't more that we shouldn't be doing than we're. That's not in the least bit any criticism of Dunkin' or any restaurant in particular, but I think it would be worthwhile for us to begin taking a closer look at that. So, congratulations and thank you.
Right, the second case from the Plan Commission is case 2023-06P, a zoning chapter amendment for solar panel changes. As part of the environmental sustainability plan, staff is reviewing various sections of the zoning ordinance to find ways to encourage sustainability. Part of the review focused on solar energy systems and ways the village could achieve a SolSmart gold level designation. SolSmart is a national designation program that recognizes communities that reduce local barriers to solar energy. The gold level designation is the highest level a local government can achieve. During the review of section 118-72 solar energy systems, it was noted that the zoning ordinance currently has barriers to solar on flat roofed buildings. It is recommended by the Plan Commission to add language that will allow for solar energy systems up to 10 feet above the existing roof or district height, whichever is less. This will accommodate installation on buildings that are at or under or potentially over the current district height maximum. A typical commercial solar panel is approximately 78 inches long, is installed at an approximately 45-degree angle and has about 2 feet of mounting equipment. This would result in a top of the panel typically being between 5 and 6 feet above the flat roof. Even if sizes or equipment changes in the future, staff feels that the proposed 10-foot height would accommodate solar panels being installed now or in the future. The Plan Commission recommends adoption of this change by a vote of 6 ayes and 1 nay.
A motion on Plan Commission case 2023-06P zoning chapter amendment regarding the installation of solar on flat roof buildings is in order. Trustee Johnson, seconded by Trustee Robinson. Comments or questions? Trustee Robinson.
I was going to talk about any potential. I heard you say that it was one nay. What was the concern?
The concern was that this particular commissioner felt that there were concerns for the structural issues related to installing, and his particular concern was that snow might accumulate on the solar panels that would add weight, but we did ultimately advise him that there was, we reviewed that during the building plan review and the permitting process. So the load calculations for roofs are designed to accommodate those things. So, but we still continue to vote no.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? If not, call the roll.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Pure Slovin, Trustee Klein,
Aye.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes. Thank you. The concluding portion of the public meeting, public comments. Does anybody wish to address the board? Yes.
My name is Michael Kroll, and I am a regular user of the North Shore Channel Trail, not just as someone who uses it now and again for recreation, but as someone who uses it to cycle for my commute to work. It has been a main contributing factor to why I moved to the area, and at first I really enjoyed my commute. But after using it the last 2 months, I cannot say the same. That is because the trail, while it is made to incentivize cyclists and pedestrians to use it, every intersection crosswalk is made to disincentivize the use of the trail due to how much they prioritize cars. The intersections are intimidatingly wide for the pedestrians to cross, being 5 to 6 lanes, requiring pedestrians and cyclists to be in the intersection for an uncomfortable amount of time. On top of that, the lanes are overly wide, not only making the distance to cross much longer, but making drivers feel much more comfortable driving at high speeds, reducing safety further in the event of a collision. The signals at these intersections are also too strict for pedestrians and too lenient for cars. Pedestrians and cyclists are only able to legally go when the walk sign is on, but they have to press the beg button for it to turn on, and it only lasts for 8 to 10 seconds. Despite the don't walk sign being illuminated for 10 to up to 30 seconds while the light is still green in the direction of travel. Conversely, the allowance of unprotected turns in the intersections allow drivers to enter the crosswalk more easily than when the walk sign is on and when pedestrians are in the crosswalk. While all the intersections feel unsafe to cross, the intersection I believe is most dangerous is the one at Toohey Avenue. I constantly see drivers blatantly ignoring signals and signs, with the Toohey intersection seeing multiple collisions within the past month, including one with a cyclist who is still recovering from his injuries. I've noticed surprisingly few people use the trail despite how useful it could be. I understand some of that can be attributed to the current construction going on, creating poor conditions, the numerous closures and lack of detours, which are an issue of their own. Still, I believe that even after the construction is finished, use of the trail will still be heavily stifled. In order to get a large, consistent ridership on the trail, it needs to feel safe to use, and the only way that is to happen is it needs to prioritize cyclists and pedestrians as much as it does cars. The only way for this to happen is that the intersection either need to be drastically traffic calmed, or if they need to stay the same, grade separated to remove pedestrians from the intersection, but preferably both. As part of my detours I had to take during the construction, I made use of the Skokie Valley Trail. Despite still prioritizing cars more than my liking at the crosswalks, they felt much safer than any along the Channel Trail, and as such, the trail saw a much higher usage. I hope one day that the Channel Trail can see that same amount of support. I take a video of every ride I take on the trail, and I keep clips of all the erratic driving I see at those intersections, and if you are interested in seeing what it's like, I would be happy to share those clips with you. Thank you.
Could we have a could you give Trustee Kuhn a copy of your remarks? And is your name, and is there a phone number on there?
No, I can put that on there.
Okay, if you would.
Yep.
Thank you.
Jerry Brozak, I'm a resident of the Optima Complex. I'm concerned about my rights as a voter. My choices being limited to one party. It's concerning the allegations of the original ethics complaint of Trustee Johnson. I did attend the Ethics Commission hearing on May 3rd. They made a decision on very narrow grounds. I'm kind of wondering, where do we go from here? The Ethics Commission only makes recommendations to the village board. What's the village board going to do next? As I emphasized last time, these are just allegations by Trustee Johnson. They have to be either proved false or proved true, and so they have to be investigated because they're very serious to limit the rights of keeping other candidates off the ballot. And they're very serious because if they're true, Trustee Johnson implies that he was dissuaded from running as a candidate because someone said they could promise him something, or he'll never be a commissioner or anything again. And how could this person speak for the village board and the mayor? The mayor makes a decision, the village board makes a decision. How could someone promise Trustee Johnson that unless he's implying that the village board members he has in their pocket as puppets or shills? That's very serious allegations. They should be proven true or false. And my question is, where do we go from here? Or is it all done and we should just forget it and nothing to be seen anymore? And if that's the attitude, that worries me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, all of you. Joanne Haberlin. And I was reading the Skokie News and had some questions about the lead pipe articles and project. I've lived in Skokie over 50 years. I've raised 3 kids here. They did very well. One is Chief of Staff to the CEO of Accenture North America. One of them is sales manager for Nestle, and one of them manages the convention center. So they did okay with Skokie Water. I don't know how much testing was done. I tried to find it online, and the last one that I found was Village of Skokie 2021 Consumer Confidence Report. And one of the statements in it was, not only were there no treatment, monitoring, or reporting violations in the reporting period, but every substance detected in Skokie's water was well below federal standards. So I realize that what we're working with is a state mandate, but it seems like there's more than one way to skin the cat. That's a real old statement. If you are having a project that could theoretically last 30 years, how has the village decided how they're going to start and where they're going to start? Are they going to start with large buildings because then a water main services more people? Are they going to decide to do it by wards? I was just interested as a longtime village citizen to know how this is going to work, and the article doesn't say very much about that. But there was some information about charges assessed to the homeowners. But not really when they are assessed. Are they assessed when the work is done? Are they assessed now and maybe your work's not going to be done for 20 years? Or these figures are for now, but if your work is done in 20 years, are the figures still the same? Who's going to think that these figures that are quoted are going to be sustainable for 30 years? And as a resident, I would like to know, does that mean my street's going to be torn up in order to replace the water line? Who takes care of my grass if you're tearing up my lawn to get to the house? Does this also mean your sidewalks are going to be damaged when you come from the street into the house? And also, I have a lot of, those of you who know me aren't surprised. And it seems like if the lead pipes are replaced, that doesn't mitigate the lead problem, because the lead problem continues to exist if the inside plumbing isn't replaced. And that includes piping and faucets and all sorts of things in the house. So by us saying we're going to erase the lead problem by putting in pieces of pipe, that's not the total solution. But I don't know that. I also ran across several articles of what people can do if they are aware of the lead problem. And I think that it would be helpful to have an article about if before your pipe is replaced, if we think that there's a lot of lead, run your cold water for a few minutes before you drink it. Hot water pipes are more susceptible to lead than cold water pipes because they erase the coating, the flex or whatever they're called. I I did some more reading, and this one is from the Science Daily by American Chemical Society. And they're suggesting a different solution rather than replacing. Today's scientists will describe a cost-effective and quick method that could overcome lead problems and make lead pipes safe for carrying drinking water. The water inside the wall of the pipe corrodes, releasing lead ions into the water. To address this problem, municipalities add corrosion inhibitors to the water. Over time, these added phosphates react with the lead ions to create compounds that deposit on the inside of the pipe. This coating or scale blocks other lead ions from leaching into the pipe and the water.
Joanne,
I'm over time, right?
you are, but let me just point out.
Are we looking at any other
You're
solutions?
talking to the wrong audience.
Oh,
We, we are under a strict mandate by the Illinois General Assembly. It's law.
to get rid of lead or to replace the pipe?
No, you're not. To replace the pipes, period. That's it. That is the law. And we're mandated to do it, and we have specific timelines that we have to fulfill. One of them is, I think, Maps, John, is it next April we have to produce an audit for the state? Is that correct?
I don't recall the exact date, but
The replacement plan, first submittal or a draft replacement plan goes to the state next April.
So you should address your arguments with your state representative or state senator. The law has been passed, and I might point out that although we have urged the legislature to the contrary, no state funding has been made available. It's an unfunded state mandate. We produce the program, we pay for the program, and we're doing the best that we can with it.
Have you decided how you're going to start?
that agent is applied at the water plant in Evanston, just so we're clear that right. And so the pipes are protected and the lead is located in the service line, which is from the B-box or the public-private property line to the home. And so we're talking about the line between that part of the system, not the water mains, but the service line. And so this summer, we are replacing water main in town. And so we always replace water main before we resurface a street, because we want to make sure that the underground infrastructure is fixed before we have the best top coat, so to speak. And so this summer, as we are replacing water main, we are mandated by the state to ensure that all of the service lines along that main no longer have lead, even though we have the application being applied already. And the reason for that, from the state's perspective, is there's construction activity or some ground movement can dislodge some of the adherence to the pipes, to the service lines. But we test our pipes, as you've commented, and test the water to ensure that our water is a safe level. So on this main that we're replacing this summer, we have determined how many lead lines there are and how many are not lead lines. But any of those lead lines must be replaced as that new water main is coming in. And so as we sit here this evening, we're completing our inventory of all of the lead lines in town. It's over 10,000, but we are working with all of the water mains that we're replacing and ensuring that those service lines are in compliance, because you don't want two types of metal to interact with one another, because that can cause problems as well. And so that's our system at this place in a very short explanation.
Thank you, because that was my last question about if you're redoing so many streets, is there a relationship between the water lines and the street paving?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for listening to me. I hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Hello. Most nights I am rushing home to be sure I don't miss bedtime and story time with my kids. Tonight, however, despite my fear of public speaking, I chose to be here. I'm concerned with the growing homeless situation in our community. I live a few blocks away with my 2 stepdaughters and my 18-month-old twin son and daughter. I've tried to ignore the growing homeless situation in the park outside the library, as well as by the Skokie Trail. I don't know the struggles of others, and I try not to judge. However, today I had a frightening experience. At 11:30 a.m., I took my 18-month-old twins for a walk to Walgreens to grab some necessities and planned to walk down the Skokie Trail with the kids. On my way to Walgreens, I was confronted and verbally accosted by an intoxicated homeless man who's making crude comments about myself and my children. Thank goodness for the automated doors at Walgreens, as I had to run at a pretty good clip to get inside. While inside, this individual continued to take off his clothes and pace outside the Walgreens door like a caged tiger. And while in the checkout line, he continued to stare at us through the windows. The Walgreens manager had to walk me to the crosswalk. All the while, the homeless individual continued to chase us and scream directly at myself and my children. I was not able to take my planned walk down the Skokie Trail due to my fear of being alone on the trail. I love Skokie and I love all it has to offer, but I'm starting to worry when all we have to offer is no longer safely available before noon on a Monday. Thank you.
May I have your name?
Yes, Meg Costello.
Okay.
Danny Cohn, lifelong resident. I want to avoid pejoratives and hyperbole and just kind of talk about the facts, at least that I see, specifically talking about the recent change to the refuse collection process here in Skokie. Personally, in my house, we have 2 of the larger 95-gallon recycling bins that we manage to fill and overflow almost every single week. We compost, and with 4 children, the number of textiles that we are getting rid of. Most of them are handed down, but when the youngest grows out of them or when children run through them, they're either donated or passed on to friends and family. So we're not putting textiles in our garbage. We're not filling up our garbage with that. Still, we're overflowing our actually 2 garbage cans at this point by every Monday. We're not doing anything crazy. No businesses running out of the house or anything like that. There's just garbage with 4 children is significant. I walk the streets of my neighborhood in the Timber Ridge area with my daughter almost daily, and I'm seeing the same thing at least in my neighborhood. And then when I move further north into what we all call Skevinston as well, seeing a lot of overflowing garbage cans by Monday morning if I happen to be out Monday before the trucks come. The smell is significantly worse when garbage sits for those extra few days. Depending on where you're able to put your garbage can, that may or may not impact your quality of life. And I used to keep my garbage cans behind my wooden fence, but I found that actually gave the squirrels more privacy to do what they wanted to do, and they were not accosted by the mailman or delivery men. I have enough Amazon deliveries that would keep the squirrels at bay. Except they had the privacy. So I actually moved them in front of my fence by the front door. But now the smell walking up to my front door is just intolerable by Sunday. And I can't imagine what it's going to be in another few weeks when it's 80, 90 degrees on a regular basis. So it's intolerable for us as humans and very attractive for all the animals, especially our militant squirrel population that I'm sure you're all familiar with. I'm also noticing on my walks, especially by the end of the week, by the beginning of the week before the trucks come, trash scattered. It's on my lawn. The squirrels are getting into the cans. They chew through the plastic. We replace the covers as often as we're allowed to, but not everybody does, and it's just trash as they tear through the bags and scatter it all over the lawns. And some people are picking it up. I have to go out with gloves and pick up all the garbage on my lawn and my neighbor's lawn because they're not living there right now as they do construction. But not everybody is. It's noticeable, it's palpable. Again, I'm trying to just speak to what I'm seeing, not hyperbole or anything like that. I am seeing a lot of comments that I can't verify myself, but a lot of similar comments on the Facebook groups for Skokie community residents, the Nextdoor application. So it's not, I don't think, just myself or my echo chamber of friends or family. So I'm just here to strongly encourage that the village board and Public Works and whomever is responsible for these decisions to monitor the situation and sincerely look at the other effects. I understand that this was part of a environmental sustainability study that came out, but I strongly encourage everyone to really look at what are the other impacts of this change, and does that impact the community that we live in, that we strive to take pride in. And honestly, again, I'm not an environmentalist and I'm not a scientist by any means, but I wonder if this could have a positive for them, but maybe negative impact for the ecosystem of a whole if our squirrel and rat population is bolstered by this bounty of food that is now available for longer before it is removed. And again, the smell attracts them. And could that, in a serious way, I don't know, impact their population size in a way that could counteract whatever we're trying to accomplish by taking some trucks off the road.
Would you leave your name and phone number with Ms. Luke?
Absolutely.
She's right here.
I'd be
She's
happy to.
kind of putting her hand up.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're in Timber Ridge?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I have about, hopefully 4 quick questions about various construction developments. But I was wondering, and I'm kind of sorry that lady left, because I've been wondering what's happening with the Homewood Suites. The construction has been suspended now for over 2 months. And I know that the village board approved the $4.5 million loan to them. So I guess I was under the impression that that was gonna help restart the work, but I'd like to know what the status is right now. When is work expected to restart, or is that $4.5 million not enough to, I mean, how much is Homewood Suites short?
We will be able to give you an update shortly. I don't have that information available today. There's doing some refinancing is being done, and we have not gotten final figures as yet. No village money has been devoted to the project.
Okay,
So
because,
that-
you know, the site
we're-
has been deserted now for over 2
Yes,
months.
I know.
It's clean, but pretty soon it's going to start attracting,
I'm well aware.
okay. The other thing was a recent edition of Cranes Magazine, talked about the 298-unit luxury development at 5400 Old Orchard Road that I guess was approved by the village back in December of last year. And that this development will be offering 13 affordable housing units at 100% of AMI, which is $110,300 for a household of 4, according to Cranes. So that is way less than 5% and way less than 10%, which is envisioned in the draft inclusionary zoning ordinance. So I just wanted to call that to the board's attention, because this project apparently was approved at the time when we were actively discussing having an affordable housing requirement. I did want to say I thought it was great news, because I also read that the Housing Opportunity Development Corporation and the Housing Solutions Lab Network at New York University had selected Skokie as one of 5 localities to participate in their 8-month project as, I think it's part of the Pierce Cities Network. And I'm assuming that when they refer to local housing officials who will be involved, that would include the envisioned housing subcommittee of the Plan Commission, or who would be involved from the Skokie Village government? Do you know?
Yes, John?
I've been involved in the conversations. Johanna Knighton, the Director of Community Development, is leading the effort. And then also one of our planners that focuses on housing is involved. And so there's a team of people, and then we also are working with the HODC to be part of the team.
Okay, but I mean, will there be wider involvement? Because this is an 8-month project, and it's coming apparently at a pretty crucial time, I think, for us, if we have a housing subcommittee.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for the professional staff of the village to interact with their peers, as well as the nonprofit representative to interact with other nonprofits from the 4 cities that were selected. And so the cities were selected. based on, plans that they have in place. And so it's really an opportunity for Johanna and Justin to be exposed to technical expertise and to discuss those opportunities with other peers of towns across the country, those that have been selected. And so there will be lots of information that is being shared and questions and dialogue that is taking place, but it's designed for the team that has been selected and is already participating with that peer group twice a month for the 8 months that you spoke to. Now that means that all of that information and policies that are shared and previous experience of those other cities will be informing our process as we move forward. And so as appropriate, it will be shared with subcommittees, it will be shared with commissions, but it'll be really informing what we're thinking about these days about housing.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, neighbors have been talking about a proposed sale of the entire block that is kind of like across from the tech park on Niles Avenue, bounded by Niles, Warren, and Searle. And since I know that we don't have an established mechanism for, the average person to find out about new projects that are being proposed, I was just wondering if there's been any discussion or outreach or gossip about.
So the zoning is a process that has been developed over years. And so there was a committee that was put together of residents that established the zoning in our downtown going back a number of years ago. And so what you're speaking of is private property owners have gotten together with their neighbors over last several, maybe years, and have put their property up for sale. And so as they navigate the opportunity to sell their property, if they have a buyer, then they have to make a determination. And then, of course, any proposed project would have to go through the normal process, which encourages public comment and goes through the Appearance Commission and Plan Commission as appropriate. But it's a process of the private property owners determining that they want to put their property on the market.
Yes, I'm not quarreling with private property rights. I'm just asking if the board has had any conversations about any proposals going up for that in terms of development.
Since 2006.
Since 2006, okay.
It's been talked about at one point, 2008, 2009. It looked as though the individual property owners had a deal, and then one of the property owners was asking for an excessive amount for his property. So the deal fell apart, and pre-COVID, I don't remember exactly when, that initiative arose again. And from what I think John hits it right on the mark, a lot of the owners are now banding together to sell their individual properties in a cluster. There's some who believe that they have overcome any problems of one person being able to stymie a project.
Okay, thank you.
Just 10 seconds, Mayor.
Give Lauren a chance. Come on, Jerry, give Lauren a chance.
Okay, yeah, 10 seconds.
And that's what it's going to be.
First, before I start my presentation, I would like to thank you for the decision that you made about purchasing 2 hybrid garbage trucks. I found it really exciting. And also about expanding the Skokie Valley Trail north of Dempster and the solar panels on flat roofs, changing the rules about that, because that's a really big step forward. I'd like to comment to someone who made earlier public comment that Public Works did 2 studies, and in both of them found that only 6% of residents in single-family homes were filling their bins once a week. So it didn't really make sense to have 2 refuse pickups for 6% of the families. And in case you're interested, I probably have my idling presentation on here that I gave to the Plan Commission if you feel like that would be relevant. But now, so I'd like to talk to you about herbicides and vegetables, and I firmly believe that one of the purposes of government is to protect residents from each other, from scams, and I'll talk about the scams next time, but the timeline here is that if my neighbor uses herbicides, I can't keep it out of my yard. And I found in early May that some thistles had looked really twisted. And not that I'm crying over thistles, because they're an invasive species. You're not even allowed to plant them. They're noxious. You get a ticket if you have them, right? Like, death to thistles. But it was weird that that happened. And I purchased some raspberry plants and went to go plant them on this edge near, like, close to my neighbor's yard, maybe 10, 15 feet. And I saw that the thistles were in that condition, and I called the garden center where I bought the plants, and they said, well, it was probably some herbicide that they sprayed, and your raspberries will be okay. All right, fine. So then I planted the raspberries about mid-May, and they're doing okay. And then the next week I purchased some tomato plants from the same garden center. I planted these tomato plants, and only the tomatoes that were growing where the herbicide had reached look like this. Right, this is my yard, like a month after the herbicide got sprayed and was gone. But it hasn't rained. Like, we got half an inch of rain in all of May put together. The same batch of tomatoes look like this when they're planted elsewhere in my yard. This is what the thistles look like in the same area. The ones that originally had the herbicide sprayed or had been, had it drift onto them have been pulled. These grew even after that. And you see on the right, that is what looks like a maple tree, and you can see the leaves kind of crawling up because it's sick just from growing in the soil that had the herbicide sprayed onto it. You can't keep it to yourself. So I live at that red dot down there, and that star up there. So one day I walked out of my house and I could smell this stuff being sprayed on somebody's yard. So I walk up the street, and I keep walking, I can't find who's spraying this stuff. I walk around the corner, and it's that far from my house. I can smell it in my yard, which means I'm breathing it in. It means it's landing on my vegetables, and I don't even know it, right? So this is a giant problem, and we need to ban it.
Okay, Lauren.
Even Bayer says
Lauren.
Okay.
Thank you. Bring your side on Thursday. Are you going to be at school? I'm sorry, everybody. You going to be at school on Thursday?
Yes.
Bring your thing. Give it to me.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll distribute it to the board. 10 seconds. 10, Jerry.
George Rose, I just want to emphasize that the allegations of Trustee Johnson are just allegations. They may be true, they may be false. Everyone's presumed innocent. I don't want to defame anyone. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry. Yes, sir.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to be very quick. I saw something, I'm sorry, David Lipsix, Skokie resident. I saw something in the agenda about 2 cars that were purchased for the city, and they were purchased from Indiana. And I'm just wondering if in the future, if those things do come up again, we have at least 1 car place in Skokie that we can probably help them along with what the city can do. Secondarily, I also echo some of the other neighbors in their issue with the garbage as well. And I understand that 6% of the people in Skokie may have this issue, but that 6% have neighbors. And again, with what we had just seen, that the pesticides can go a couple of houses down. The 6% of people that are going to be affected by the change in garbage also have neighbors, and that's also going to have chain of effects going down with the food that's out and the animals, and there are unintended consequences for anything that the city will do. So you can't have 6% of the people, and we're not going to care about them on this side, but we're going to ban pesticides for something that's going to be going down six houses. I'm sorry. Have a good
No, thank you. And the purchase of the automobiles, we do it according to the bidding standards established by the state of Illinois. And at the moment, it's very difficult to even get cars. So I want to give Max an enormous amount of credit for being able to even get these.
Sure.
There are a couple communities who literally are exploring the used car lots and the car lots without telling anybody, because it's very difficult to do it. But you raise a legitimate point. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I actually wasn't planning to speak, but after hearing some other village residents, I also would like to echo my sentiment on the trash pickup issue. I live in a completely different neighborhood than the gentleman who spoke previously, and I'm finding the exact same problems myself. I take my son to school in another part of Skokie, and I'm seeing the exact same situation happening in a completely different neighborhood. So I'm wondering what steps we might be able to take to revisit potentially bringing back a second garbage day pickup. And I was wondering if Mr. Steinkart might be able to address that.
Max, I think he was talking about.
What is it you?
Well, right now, we have a one-day pickup, and
Yes.
there are some residents who are expressing concerns.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what initiatives we might be able
We-
to look into to address these concerns. And I'm wondering if the head of Public Works might be able to address that.
Yes, and we do.
So what's
I
the
will be,
program?
I will be happy to set up an appointment for you. You can meet with Max or with John and me.
What I'm wondering is there a process where we're gonna be analyzing the data on the
Yes.
concerns of the residents? And what's the timeline on that process?
Well, we passed the budget, so it's in the budget.
Okay.
And we are keeping track of the effect of the change.
Okay. How are we
w-
keeping track of
w-
that? What I'm asking is, what's the process of keeping track of it?
Max, do you want to address that?
And while he's approaching the podium, I'll just give a piece of data. The amount of food composting that the community allocated in the month of May, today, this year, compared to previous year, was more than triple. And so that amount of quantity of refuse did not go to the landfill. And so congratulations to the community on that accomplishment. Max, go ahead.
I think that's great, by the way. I think that's fantastic.
So, I would say that the position that we're in now, you know, the transition to once-a-week refuse collection was not set out as some form of trial period. This was a change in service level. So, my answer would be, I think, you know, as we look at establishing a service level in government, is if at some point in time the village board and the village staff decide, hey, this is a service level we don't think is working for us, then we reserve the right to go back and revisit those decisions. Having said that, there is not some timeline that's out there by which the village has said, well, we're trying this out for some period of time and then we're going to go revisit it. So, we've certainly heard the comments here this evening. The village manager and myself, the mayor and I, as a matter of fact, have talked about what we see in the community on refuse collection days. I'm out in the community on refuse collection days early in the morning when our trucks are going out so we can see what's out there. I have had a conversation with the mayor last week about what he's seen in certain neighborhoods of the community, and so we're definitely talking about it. I see the waits every day for the routes since we've started this. I know what's going on out there. So I would say for those that are reacting to what we've seen in the month of May, we know that historically speaking, May is always one of the heaviest 4 months of our collection system, if not in the top 3 of our collection system. So we know this is a comparatively heavier time in our system. We also know, and I know some of these comments are based upon what people council observed last week. Last week was the first holiday collection that we've seen since we've gone to once a week. And simply having one extra day of collection, which is what happens when you have a Monday holiday and collection is pushed back by a day, having a garbage collection delayed by a day, if I'm remembering math correctly, we should see 14% more waste sitting there waiting for us. Not to mention the fact that it's a holiday weekend, which tends to engender gatherings, barbecues, whatnot, engender some extra waste collection. So we knew, I think, that given that we started this transition in May, we knew Memorial Day was, and the first collection after Memorial Day weekend, we were gonna see some real weight out there, and we did. And as I talked to the mayor last week, we observed that with having had a 3-day weekend, one thing we saw on the Tuesday collection event was people were home for a 3-day weekend, so what did they do? They also cleaned out some garages and they cleaned out some extra areas of their home, so in addition to having just what I'll call regular or putrescible waste, there are also some couches out there for us and some desks out there for us and those sorts of things. And those sorts of things come out into our system week in and week out, but there's a little bit more of that sort of thrown into the mix as well. So when you're running a collection system and running a system of trucks and you know you're gonna be heavy, and you're driving around in the morning and you see those things out there waiting for you too, you sort of go, oh, great. So I guess that's my reaction right now is, you know, did we see a heavy week last week? Yes. Did we see a heavy week that we knew was coming? Yes. We're monitoring the situation carefully. We're monitoring the situation as best we can. I've heard concerns, of course, about toters being overfilled, squirrels, other rodents. Of course we're concerned about that. So we're out there monitoring this every day. We share the same concerns that all our residents do about not wanting to see bad situations created. So I'm not sure that that responds to everything that Jason was asking about, but that's as best I can just sit here and say to you.
And there is
that sort of represents where our thinking is.
There is a program where if somebody needs a second toter, that can be supplied.
That
Can you, maybe you can explain
I'm
that?
glad you mentioned that, but one of the things that we did was we set in our policy that we wanted to have a 60-day period before we're going to make those toters available out into the community. And the availability of those will be subject to some amount of scrutiny of people's waste disposal practices, sorry. And the gentleman who spoke earlier spoke and articulated to some of those factors, whether he did so knowingly or not, and I appreciated hearing that. You know, he recycles and has not one but two recycle toters, and he mentioned textile recycling. And so those are sort of some of the things that we'll evaluate when people make those second toter requests is, what are you doing to manage your waste? Because a part of this from the standpoint of the Environmental Commission, and I think from some members of the village board, was part of this is about getting people to think about their waste. We talk about recycling a lot, but there's 3 R's, right? There's recycling, there's reduction, and there's reuse. So part of this is about getting people to think about reduction and reuse and recycling and be more thoughtful about waste. So in this policy, though, we set out that we wanted to have this 60-day period because there was a thought that while there will be concerns from parts of the community that the instant reaction will be, I need 2 toters, this will never work. And so we wanted people to have what we would informally call a cooling off period, try it. Give us the opportunity to work with you, to help try and inform you about things that maybe not all people are aware of about textile recycling, regular recycling, food scrap alternatives that are now available, these other things that can be done to reduce waste, because that also is part of the mission and the direction that we received. So that 60-day period, let's say, began May 1. So you're more than halfway through it. Those who want to be considered for, second toters, contact Public Works. You can do that online. You can do that by calling us. We have people whose names are on the list. Please don't take this as my urging for all of you to run home and sign up for it. But I'm telling you, that's available to you, okay?
Thank you.
I got a
Thanks,
question.
Max.
What are the other two heavy months besides May?
They will be either June, July, or August. So I mean, it's the summer months.
Okay, thank you.
Is December a heavy month?
You can be, yeah.
If I could just clarify, and appreciate that. What I'm asking for is if we could maybe have a concrete timeline as opposed to a laissez-faire analysis done. I'd prefer something where maybe we can look at something having a little bit more concrete and analyzing data year over year, maybe May through May, April to April. It's great that we're composting more. That's phenomenal. I think that's great. Applaud to our community. But I think we should also look at the effects that we're having on the community, and I'd like something with a little bit more of a concrete structure. So I'm wondering, Mayor, is that something we might be able to do?
Let me take a look at it.
Okay, so you're gonna let us know if we can have something in writing,
I will,
some sort of
I will
structure?
take a look at it.
That would be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You know me. I can't hide from you. No, we have a joking relationship. Thank you. We now are going into executive session. Trustee Sucker, you have to make your formal motion.
I move we adjourn and go into executive